Behind the laughs and hijinks of this beloved World War II sitcom lies a treasure trove of bizarre secrets that would make Colonel Klink's monocle fall right out of his eye. From Jewish actors portraying Nazis as an act of revenge to wedding rings hidden by gloves and sets destroyed by exploitation films, Hogan's heroes harbored more shocking truths than the tunnels beneath Stalag 13. These incredible behind-the-scenes revelations prove reality was stranger than any escape plan Hogan ever devised. Fact 1. 4 Nazi characters were Jewish refugees. One of the most remarkable ironies in television history lies at the heart of Hogan's heroes, where 4 of the main German characters were actually portrayed by Jewish actors who had personally fled Nazi persecution. Werner Klemperer, who played the bumbling Commandant Colonel Klink, was born in Cologne, Germany, to a prominent musical family. His father was the renowned conductor Otto Klemperer, who led the Berlin Philharmonic until the Nazi rise to power forced the family to flee Germany in 1933, first to Vienna and then eventually to Los Angeles. John Banner, the lovable Sergeant Schultz, famous for his catchphrase, "I know nothing," was also born in Austria and had escaped Nazi-occupied Europe before the war began. He later served in the United States Army during World War II, fighting against the very regime his character represented on screen. Leon Askin, who portrayed the stern General Burkhalter, had an even more tragic connection to the Holocaust, as members of his family were murdered at the Treblinka death camp. Howard Kane, who played the menacing Gestapo Major Hochstetter, was actually born Howard Cohen in Nashville, Tennessee, and was the only one of the 4 who hadn't personally fled Nazi persecution, though he was still Jewish and had served in the United States Navy during the war. For these actors, taking on these roles wasn't just about entertainment or career advancement. It was a form of personal revenge and defiance against the Nazi ideology that had destroyed their lives and families. They turned their oppressors into objects of ridicule, making German officers appear as buffoons and incompetents week after week for 6 years. Werner Klemperer later reflected on this, noting that portraying Nazis as bumbling fools was their way of fighting back against fascism through humor and making their former tormentors look absolutely ridiculous to millions of viewers. Fact 2. Robert Clary was a Holocaust survivor. Behind the cheerful French cook Corporal Lebeau was an actor whose real-life story was far more harrowing than any fictional prison camp adventure. Robert Clary, born Robert Max Weiderman in Paris in 1926, was the youngest of 14 children in a Jewish family, and his journey to Hogan's heroes began in the darkest chapter of human history. When Clary was just 16 years old, he was deported from France to the Otmouth concentration camp and later transferred to the infamous Buchenwald camp in Germany. He survived these horrific conditions partly through his natural talent for singing and dancing, which he used to entertain both fellow prisoners and occasionally even guards in desperate attempts to stay alive. The camp authorities tattooed the number A5714 on his arm, a permanent mark that he carried for the rest of his life and which was sometimes visible during filming of the show. The true tragedy of Clary's story became clear only after the war ended. Of his 13 siblings and parents, 12 family members perished in various concentration camps, including Auschwitz. Clary was one of the few survivors from his entire extended family, making his later career in entertainment not just a professional achievement, but a testament to human resilience. What makes this even more remarkable is that Clary chose to play a prisoner of war character on a comedy show, finding a way to bring lightness and humor to a setting that held such dark memories for him personally. He later wrote about his experiences in his autobiography titled From the Holocaust to Hogan's Heroes, where he detailed both his survival story and his acting career. For Clary, appearing on the show wasn't just about playing a role, but about reclaiming his narrative and showing that survivors could find joy and laughter even after experiencing unimaginable horror. Fact 3. Werner Klemperer's unusual contract condition. When Werner Klemperer was offered the role of Colonel Klink, he made one of the most unusual demands in television history that would shape the entire character for the show's 6-year run. Klemperer told the producers that he would only accept the part if they guaranteed that Colonel Klink would always be portrayed as a complete fool whose schemes would never succeed, and he made it clear that if they ever wrote an episode where Klink came out as the hero, he would immediately quit the show. This wasn't just an actor being difficult about his character development. Klemperer was deeply conscious of the fact that he would be playing a German officer during the Nazi regime, and as someone whose Jewish family had fled Germany to escape persecution, he felt a moral responsibility about how the character would be presented to audiences. His agent had initially failed to tell him that the show was intended to be a comedy, and when Klemperer first read the script, he thought it was going to be a serious drama about prisoners of war. Once he understood the comedic nature of the show, Klemperer saw an opportunity to make German officers look ridiculous and incompetent, rather than heroic or sympathetic. He wanted to ensure that Colonel Klink would always be the butt of the joke, never someone that viewers might admire or respect. The producers agreed to his condition, and it became an unwritten rule that guided the writers throughout the entire series. This contractual stipulation meant that no matter what happened in any episode, Colonel Klink would always end up looking foolish, confused, or outwitted by the prisoners. Whether he was trying to impress his superiors, catch the heroes in their schemes, or simply maintain order in the camp, Klink's plans invariably backfired in spectacular fashion, making him one of television's most beloved bumbling authority figures while ensuring he never appeared competent or threatening. Fact 4. The set was destroyed by exploitation film. The iconic Stalag 13 set that had housed 6 years of comedic prisoner of war antics met its end in the most unlikely and controversial way imaginable. After Hogan's Heroes was cancelled in 1971, the elaborate outdoor set on the Desilu Productions lot in Culver City remained standing for 3 more years, serving as a piece of television history that fans could still visit during studio tours. However, in 1974, the set was chosen as the location for filming the final explosive scene of a notorious exploitation film called Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS. This movie was part of a controversial genre known as Nazi exploitation films that emerged in the 1970s, featuring graphic violence and disturbing themes that were completely opposite to the lighthearted comedy that had previously been filmed on the same location. The film's producers needed to blow up a concentration camp-style set for their climactic scene, and the existing Hogan's Heroes set provided the perfect ready-made location. Rather than building their own set from scratch, they simply used the barracks, guard towers, and other structures that had been home to Colonel Hogan and his team for so many years. When the cameras rolled for the final scene of Ilsa, the entire Stalag 13 set was destroyed in a massive explosion that marked the definitive end of the show's physical legacy. Ironically, the producers of Hogan's Heroes didn't mind this dramatic destruction because it actually saved them money. They had been facing the expensive task of demolishing the aging set anyway, so having another film company blow it up for free solved a costly problem. The explosion meant that nothing remained of the beloved set where Bob Crane, Werner Klemperer, and the rest of the cast had created so many memorable moments, leaving only photographs and film footage as evidence of where television magic had once happened. Fact 5. Larry Hovis never removed his wedding ring. Throughout the entire 6-year run of Hogan's Heroes, actor Larry Hovis, who played the bumbling Sergeant Carter, created one of the most persistent wardrobe challenges in television history by absolutely refusing to remove his wedding ring. Hovis was deeply devoted to his wife and felt so strongly about keeping his wedding band on that he would not take it off even for the cameras, despite the fact that his character Carter was supposed to be a single soldier with no wife back home. This created a constant problem for the show's continuity department and costume designers, who had to find creative ways to hide the ring during filming. In most scenes, you can spot Carter wearing gloves, even when it doesn't make much sense for the character to have them on, such as during indoor scenes or in situations where other characters have bare hands. When gloves weren't appropriate for the scene, Hovis would carefully position his hands so that his ring finger was hidden from the camera, often by keeping his left hand in his pocket, behind his back, or turned away from view. The dedication to hiding this ring became such an ongoing production concern that it influenced how scenes were shot and how Carter's character was positioned within group shots. Directors and cinematographers had to constantly keep track of Hovis's hand placement to make sure the wedding ring wouldn't accidentally appear on screen and break the illusion that Carter was an unmarried prisoner of war. Despite all these precautions, eagle-eyed viewers have occasionally spotted the ring in certain episodes where the blocking didn't quite work or where Hovis forgot to keep his hand properly concealed. These moments have become something of a treasure hunt for dedicated fans who enjoy scanning episodes to catch glimpses of the forbidden wedding band that Hovis loved too much to ever remove, even for his acting career. Fact 6. Bob Crane originally auditioned for different shows. Bob Crane's path to becoming Colonel Hogan was far from guaranteed, as he actually turned down 3 major television opportunities before finally accepting the role that would define his career. At the time, Crane was already a successful radio personality hosting the #1 rated morning show in Los Angeles, and television producers were eager to capitalize on his charm and quick wit by offering him various starring roles. The first opportunity that Crane rejected was a late-night talk show position that could have positioned him as the successor to Jack Paar, who had been hosting The Tonight Show before Johnny Carson took over. Television executives saw Crane's radio success and natural interviewing skills as perfect qualifications for late-night television, and this role could have made him one of the biggest names in entertainment during the 1960s. Crane also turned down starring roles in two promising sitcoms that went on to have successful runs without him. Please Don't Eat the Daisies was based on a popular 1960 film and best-selling book about a family living in an old house while raising four rowdy boys with the help of a housekeeper. The other show, My Living Doll, offered Crane the chance to star opposite Julie Newmar in a science fiction comedy about a man living with a beautiful android, similar to other fantastical sitcoms of the era like Bewitched and My Favorite Martian. When his agent finally presented him with the script for Hogan's Heroes, Crane initially thought it was a serious drama about prisoners of war and wasn't interested. Only after his agent explained that it was actually a comedy did Crane reconsider, ultimately deciding to take what he called a gamble on the unconventional concept of a funny show set in a Nazi prison camp, a decision that would make him a television icon. Fact 7. The theme song had secret lyrics. While millions of viewers heard the catchy instrumental theme song that opened every episode of Hogan's Heroes, very few people knew that composer Jerry Fielding had actually written complete lyrics to accompany the familiar military-style march. These hidden words were never used in the television show itself, but they were recorded by several cast members for a special soundtrack album that was released during the show's run. The lyrics began with the rousing lines, "Heroes, heroes, husky men of war, sons of all the heroes of the war before," and continued with verses that celebrated the courage and ingenuity of the prisoners while maintaining the show's lighthearted tone. Richard Dawson, Robert Clary, Ivan Dixon, and Larry Hovis formed a quartet to record these songs for an album called Hogan's Heroes Sing the Best of World War II, which featured not only the theme song with lyrics, but also various popular songs from the 1940s era. The decision to keep the theme song instrumental for the television broadcasts was likely made to maintain the show's unique tone, as adding sung lyrics might have made the opening feel too much like a traditional war movie or overly patriotic in a way that could have clashed with the comedy. The instrumental version allowed the music to set the right mood without being too heavy-handed about the war setting. Bob Crane, who had been a professional drummer before his acting career, actually played the drums on the recorded theme music, including the distinctive opening drum riff that viewers heard at the beginning of each episode. Interestingly, this same drum pattern was borrowed from the 1962 war film The Longest Day, creating an additional musical connection between Hogan's Heroes and other World War II entertainment of the era. The soundtrack album became a novelty item for fans who wanted to hear their favorite characters singing the songs their parents might have listened to during the actual war. Fact 8. One of 3 remaining Mercedes was used. The flashy gray and black convertible that General Burkhalter drove around Stalag 13 wasn't just any ordinary vintage car that the prop department picked up for the show. The Mercedes-Benz W31 that appeared in multiple episodes was actually one of the rarest automobiles in existence, representing a piece of genuine wartime history that made its way onto a Hollywood soundstage. Mercedes-Benz had originally produced only 57 of these particular W31 convertibles before and during World War II, making them extremely limited even when they were new. The war and its aftermath proved devastating to these luxury vehicles, as most were destroyed during bombing raids, abandoned during retreats, or simply scrapped for metal during the massive reconstruction efforts that followed Germany's defeat in 1945. By the time Hogan's Heroes began production in the mid-1960s, automotive historians believe that only 3 of these Mercedes convertibles had survived the war and its aftermath intact. The show's producers somehow managed to secure one of these incredibly rare vehicles for their production, meaning that viewers were watching a genuine piece of wartime automotive history every time General Burkhalter rolled up to the camp gates. The decision to use such a valuable and historically significant car for a television comedy was either a stroke of incredible luck or an example of the show's commitment to authenticity in its props and vehicles. Given that 54 of the original 57 cars had been lost to history, the Mercedes that appeared on Hogan's Heroes represented one of the last surviving examples of this particular model line. This means that the car driven by Leon Askin's pompous General Burkhalter was likely worth far more than anyone on the production realized at the time, and it certainly added an extra layer of historical authenticity to a show that was otherwise filled with deliberate anachronisms and comedic liberties with wartime details. Fact 9. The show used salt and paint for snow. Creating a convincing German winter in the warm sunshine of Southern California required some creative thinking from the Hogan's Heroes production team, who had to make it look like Stalag 13 was constantly blanketed in snow even while filming during hot summer months. The show's creators decided that having perpetual winter would solve several practical problems, including avoiding continuity issues between episodes and creating the harsh atmosphere that audiences would expect from a German prisoner of war camp. During the first few seasons of the show, the set designers achieved this snowy effect by spreading large amounts of salt across the outdoor sets, covering the ground, rooftops, and other surfaces to create the illusion of fresh snowfall. While this method looked fairly convincing on camera, it created ongoing logistical challenges for the production crew, who had to constantly reapply the salt between takes and after any weather conditions that might wash it away or disturb the carefully arranged winter scene. By the fourth season, the production team had discovered a much more practical and cost-effective solution to their artificial winter problem. Instead of continuing to use salt, which was expensive and required constant maintenance, they switched to using white paint to create permanent snow effects on the buildings and other set pieces. This painted snow could withstand the elements much better than salt and didn't need to be replaced nearly as often, saving both time and money during production. The switch to paint also allowed the set designers to create more detailed and realistic-looking snow accumulations on windowsills, door frames, and rooftops that would stay in place throughout long filming days. Actors like Bob Crane and Werner Klemperer had to constantly pretend to be cold and wear heavy winter coats, even when temperatures on the California set reached 90 degrees or higher, making the fake snow effects both a visual necessity and a source of physical discomfort for the cast. Fact 10. Richard Dawson couldn't sound American. Richard Dawson's journey to becoming the beloved British Corporal Newkirk began with what might have been considered a failed audition for the show's leading role. When casting directors were looking for actors to fill the main characters in Hogan's Heroes, Dawson initially tried out for the starring part of Colonel Robert Hogan, the smooth-talking American officer who would become the central figure of the entire series. However, despite Dawson's natural charisma and comedic timing that would later make him famous as a game show host, he simply could not master a convincing American accent during his audition process. His natural British speaking patterns and vocal inflections kept coming through, no matter how hard he tried to sound like an American colonel, making it clear to the casting directors that he wouldn't be believable as the all-American hero that the character required. Rather than dismiss Dawson entirely, the producers recognized his talent and decided to create a role that would take advantage of his authentic British accent instead of fighting against it. They reimagined one of the prisoner characters as Corporal Peter Newkirk, a member of the Royal Air Force who had been shot down and captured by the Germans, which allowed Dawson to use his natural speaking voice while still being part of the main cast. This casting change turned out to be incredibly fortunate for both Dawson and the show, as his portrayal of the crafty, quick-witted Newkirk became one of the most memorable characters in the series. Newkirk was written as the group's con artist, magician, pickpocket, and master of disguise, roles that perfectly suited Dawson's comedic abilities and natural charm. His British accent actually added authenticity to the international flavor of the prisoner of war camp, making the show more realistic by including allied forces from different countries, rather than having all the heroes be American soldiers. Fact 11. The set had trapdoors and pranks. The Stalag 13 set was far more elaborate than most television productions of the 1960s, featuring a complex network of functional trapdoors and hidden passages that perfectly matched the show's storyline about prisoners operating a secret underground operation. The most famous of these hidden features was a realistic-looking tree stump that actually concealed a secret room underneath, complete with a working entrance that actors could use to disappear and reappear dramatically during filming. These functional set pieces weren't just props for the cameras, as they became the perfect tools for the close-knit cast to play elaborate pranks on visiting guest stars who weren't familiar with all the hidden features of the elaborate outdoor set. According to behind-the-scenes accounts, regular cast members would often tell unsuspecting guest actors to wait in the secret room beneath the tree stump or in one of the other hidden areas, promising they would return shortly to continue rehearsing a scene or discussing script changes. The pranksters would then simply walk away, and leave the confused guest star waiting underground while they went about their regular business, sometimes for extended periods of time. Larry Hovis and Richard Dawson were reportedly the most frequent perpetrators of these practical jokes, taking advantage of their familiarity with every hidden passage and trapdoor on the set to create elaborate scenarios that would leave guest actors wondering if they had been forgotten, or if this was somehow part of the actual filming process. The extensive network of tunnels and hidden rooms also served practical production purposes beyond pranks, allowing actors to make quick entrances and exits that would have been impossible with a traditional set design. The functional nature of these hidden passages added an extra layer of realism to the show's central premise about prisoners maintaining a secret operation right under the noses of their captors, making the impossible seem believable to television audiences. Fact 12. Bob Crane's dressing room was porn central. Behind the wholesome image of Colonel Hogan lay a shocking reality that cast and crew members discovered when they visited Bob Crane's dressing room during the show's production. Crane had transformed his private space on the set into what became widely known among the production team as Porn Central, a nickname that reflected the disturbing collection of explicit materials he kept stored there throughout the show's 6-year run. According to accounts from people who worked on the show, Crane's dressing room was filled with hidden Polaroid photographs, film negatives, and homemade adult movies that documented his numerous sexual encounters with women he met through his celebrity status. He would frequently show off these materials to cast members, crew workers, and even visitors to the set, treating his explicit collection as a source of entertainment and bragging rights rather than something to keep private. This behavior created an uncomfortable atmosphere for many people working on the production, as Crane's obsession with documenting and displaying his personal life became an open secret that everyone had to navigate around. His son Robert later confirmed that his father had been collecting this type of material since at least 1966, meaning that the behavior continued throughout most of the show's production period. The situation became so well known on set that Crane's dressing room reputation extended beyond just the Hogan's Heroes production. Even when he worked on other projects, including family-friendly Disney movies, crew members and fellow actors would sometimes refer to his private spaces by the same infamous nickname. This behavior contributed to the decline of Crane's career after Hogan's Heroes ended, as word of his conduct spread throughout Hollywood, and made many producers and directors reluctant to work with him despite his talent as a performer and his popularity with television audiences. Fact 13. Carter's jacket mysteriously became new. One of the most puzzling wardrobe mysteries in Hogan's Heroes involves Sergeant Carter's iconic brown sheep-lined jacket, which served as practically a second skin for the character throughout the entire series. Larry Hovis wore this distinctive piece of clothing in virtually every scene, and it became so associated with Carter that fans would have trouble imagining the character without it wrapped around his shoulders. What made this jacket so memorable was its consistently worn and weathered appearance, which perfectly matched Carter's role as the somewhat bumbling explosives expert who was always getting into messy situations around the camp. The jacket looked like it had been through countless adventures, with dirt stains, wrinkles, and a generally well-used appearance that suggested it had been Carter's faithful companion through many dangerous missions and camp activities. However, eagle-eyed viewers who paid close attention to wardrobe details noticed something extremely odd happen during Season 6 of the show. In one particular episode, Carter's beloved jacket suddenly appeared completely transformed, looking bright, clean, and shiny as if it had just been purchased from a store or returned from the world's most thorough dry cleaning service. This dramatic change was never explained within the context of the episode, and no dialogue addressed why Carter's jacket had suddenly become pristine when it had looked battle-worn for the previous 5 seasons. The transformation was so noticeable that it raised questions about whether the costume department had accidentally used a backup jacket, whether the original had been professionally cleaned between seasons, or whether this was simply an oversight that made it past the production team. After this mysterious one-episode appearance, the jacket returned to its familiar worn and dirty state in subsequent episodes, making the brief transformation even more puzzling and leaving fans to wonder what exactly happened to Carter's jacket during that strange wardrobe anomaly. Fact 14. The show featured anachronistic references. Despite Hogan's Heroes being carefully set during World War II in the 1940s, the show's writers frequently included references to things that wouldn't exist for many years after the war ended, creating amusing historical inconsistencies that most viewers probably never noticed. These anachronistic references reflected the writer's tendency to use contemporary cultural touchstones from the 1960s, rather than staying strictly within the time period of their fictional setting. One of the most obvious examples involved the characters making multiple references to Speedy Gonzales, the famous fast-talking Mexican mouse from Warner Brothers cartoons. The prisoners would often compare someone's quick movements or speedy actions to this cartoon character, calling him the fastest mouse in Mexico, and using his name as a way to describe rapid escapes or hurried activities around the camp. However, Speedy Gonzales didn't make his first appearance until the 1953 cartoon Cattails for Two, which was a full 8 years after World War II had ended. Another glaring anachronism appeared when characters mentioned baking German chocolate cake, treating it as if this dessert was a well-known recipe that had existed for years. In reality, German chocolate cake wasn't created until 1957 by a homemaker in Dallas, Texas, who developed the recipe using Baker's German sweet chocolate, which was named after Samuel German, who had created a type of dark baking chocolate for the Baker's Chocolate Company over a century earlier. These historical mistakes suggest that the show's writers were more focused on creating entertaining dialogue and relatable references for their 1960s audience than on maintaining strict historical accuracy. The anachronisms also demonstrate how difficult it can be for writers to completely avoid using cultural references from their own time period, even when they're consciously trying to create a story set in an earlier era. Fact 15. A real POW, named Robert Hogan, existed. In one of the most remarkable coincidences in television history, the fictional Colonel Robert Hogan was actually named after a real American pilot who had experienced his own prisoner of war adventure during World War II. The real Robert Hogan was flying B-24 bomber missions out of Italy when his aircraft was shot down over Yugoslavia in January of 1945, just months before the war would finally end in Europe. After being captured by German forces, the real Robert Hogan was eventually transported to a prisoner of war camp called Oflag 13, which was the officers' section of the camp complex near Nuremberg, Germany. This was adjacent to Stalag 13D, making it essentially the same camp system that would later inspire the fictional setting of the television show, though the real camp was located near Nuremberg rather than the fictional location near Hammelburg that the show used. The connection between the real pilot and the fictional character wasn't just a coincidence of names, as the two men actually met in person during the height of the show's popularity. In 1966, Dr. Robert Hogan contacted the producers of Hogan's Heroes after learning about the television show that featured a character with his exact name and similar background. This led to an arranged meeting between the real former prisoner of war and Bob Crane, the actor who portrayed the fictional version of his namesake. According to accounts from the real Robert Hogan's family, the former pilot didn't often discuss his prisoner of war experiences, but he did mention that the German guards had treated the prisoners reasonably well under the circumstances, though food was extremely scarce and both prisoners and guards were gradually starving. He also recalled that a young German girl from a nearby village would occasionally throw pieces of fruit over the camp fences to help feed the hungry Allied prisoners.